Salute is a program for and about men and women who have served our country. Our program includes news about the laws that affect veterans, information on benefits and services, and news from veterans organizations. And now, our host, Bob Peters.
Hello and welcome to Salute. I'm your host, Bob Peters, and my guest today is Mr. Stu Miller. Mr. Miller was in the United States Army, Korean veteran. I want to thank you for coming on the show, sir.
Thank you.
And thank you for your service. And would you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're originally from?
Originally from the Philadelphia area, South Jersey, and then everywhere else. Chicago, New York, Miami.
Yeah, the reason we should say that is because, you know, this is Salute. We're going to talk about what you went through as a working in the prisoner of war camps.
Prisoner of war camps, yeah.
Yeah. But give me a little bit, you were in showbiz too, right?
Yes, before.
So just quickly.
Before the Army, yeah. Well, I was
Before
working in Philadelphia in show business. I did pantomime. Everybody was doing pantomime acts in the 50s. That's how they started in show business. And as I said, Rip Taylor started with me too there. We did the same thing, and then we got together in Tokyo, Japan. And then got back together down in Fort Lauderdale and started the strip joints. You have to start somewhere, I guess.
I guess, yeah.
But that was a way to get moving in show business. And I went into dancing and then worked at the Casablanca Hotel for quite some time, had a dance studio down there, and used to fly to Cuba every weekend to get the Cuban people to teach us new steps, to teach our people that were coming back from the north down to stay at the hotels in Miami Beach. It was fun. It was a lot of interest stuff.
Yeah, I'll bet. And then, like I said, we could probably talk an hour about the people you've met and some of the. But this is Salute, so this is where we're
back to the Army.
Back to the Army, yes. Speaking of back to the Army, how did you get into the Army? Were you drafted? Or?
Conscripted, yes. I didn't want to go, but I'm glad that I did. When I got there, I wanted to. It was breaking up my theatrical career, and when I got there, and I got finally where I was going to Korea, and I had a very interesting job with the North Korean prisoners of war. I really enjoyed it, and I started to learn the language. It was informative to me, and I'm always searching for something, and of course I like history, so being an antique dealer also now. I like the things that come from the past that work up into the future. So it was interesting for me, the language and the history of that country in Korea.
Yeah.
And I just enjoyed it. So,
let's just roll back a minute. You got drafted into the Army.
Yeah.
And where did you go for basic?
Basic at Fort Dix.
Fort Dix.
They wanted me to be a cook. And I said, no, I hate to be a cook. But I ended up having a restaurant for 9 years up in Cold Spring, New York, across the Hudson River from West Point.
My question really is, how did you get, for our viewing audience, you were like a supervisor of a prisoner of war camp.
Yes.
And we're going to get into that, but how did a guy who was in show business wind up in a prisoner of war camp? What made them decide that you'd be the guy for that?
I just think they didn't know what the heck to do with me. They had to find something for me to do. They wanted me to be a cook at first, and I was crying and carrying on and cheering up. I didn't want to be a cook. And as I said, 25 years later, I ended up having a restaurant for 9 years.
Yeah.
So I ended up being a cook anyhow. But no, I just don't think they knew what to do with me.
You went from a cook to this prisoner of war camp. That's the connection I'm trying to get to. How did that happen?
That was later, civilian life, way after the Army. No, after the Army. I was up in Cold Spring, New York, and I started from the antique business to the restaurant. Then I became a jeweler, and started working with jewelry in New York City on 53rd Street.
But when you were in Korea,
yes,
you were in the Army at the time, right?
I was in the Army, yes.
Okay, that's where I'm trying to get to.
Okay, they sent. Okay,
I mean, if somebody got enlisted into the Army or got drafted into the Army, you say, well, hey, I volunteered to be a liaison or whatever at a prisoner of war camp. I mean, that's just not the normal job. They usually hand you a rifle, or you're on this or that.
My unit was called. Actually, it came out of Psy War, PSY War. They didn't like the sound of that because of the Japanese after the Second World War. So they turned it into what they called CIE, Civil Intelligence and Education. So it became a whole unit of its own, which was a whole unit. Had a general, had its officers and enlisted men, of which I was. And whatever they figured, because I had been an instructor in different things, they felt that it would be apropos for me to get into doing some kind of instructional work. So that's how I ended up. I had libraries and radio stations. Again, the show business came in. I had radio stations. I used to have these North Korean prisoners. There were no females, so they dressed all up in drag, and they did the female parts and the male parts both, and they did their shows and they did their dramas. And I said, their Korean dramas lasted for 3 days. They started one day, and it went on for 2 days and 3 days. It just never stopped. So they took all of these different parts. And that was kind of interesting because we were supplying them with scripts for the old ancient shows that they used to have, you know, and we were playing music and broadcasting things to them. The ulterior motive was to try to instill in them that democracy was better than what they had, and how successful it was, I don't know. We tried, we did whatever we could. We had 16, 18 teachers worked for me. And they would go and they had classes from kindergarten all the way up to college grads. And our teachers were Korean and Chinese and Japanese. And they were all degreed people who worked for us. And they would come in every morning and go into the compounds and set up their classes and teach the Koreans according to what level they were. And it was very interesting because all this feedback kept coming through our CIE. Our headquarters was in Tokyo, but our second headquarters was in Busan, Korea, and then we extended all the way up Korea, all the way up to Nunsan, where my camp was. And there were I think 7 or 8 camps. There was one, I don't remember 3 names. One was for Chinese and the rest were for the North Koreans. And the Chinese were brilliant. They were on a Sunji so something. It was a three-syllable word that was an island down south of Busan, and that was for the Chinese people. They were taking beer cans and making jeeps out of them. They were pounding the beer cans and using Briggs & Stratton motors that we sent to them, and they made the honchos. They called them honchos, the guys that were in charge. They were roaming around the camps and on these little beer can jeeps that they made up. They were brilliant. They were brilliant people, and so were the Koreans. They were very, very clever. So they were artists. They were builders. They did all of their own. Things that they needed. They had a great deal of amenities that were within the camp itself. So, but I was telling you that one Christmas Eve, there was an interesting concept. We were right next to the one compound, and we were high, so all the compounds were down below us. And Christmas Eve, now, what happened is I don't know how many people were Christian. They were Christians, they were Buddhists, and they were Confucius. And I don't know which was which, but we had 8,500 prisoners, 8,500 prisoners in our camp. And on Christmas Eve, they dripped candles and made candles, and there were, I don't know how many thousands, but every compound had parades of people, of the prisoners, holding candles. So this was kind of a tribute to our faith as being Christians, I suppose, and it was kind of like a tribute to the people that were taking care of them and trying to teach them and educate them in the best way that we could, and it was really interesting. It was to see these thousands and thousands of prisoners walking around on Christmas Eve with candles in their hands. It was amazing. It brought tears to your eyes, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
So in the middle of the night, you know. So then later on, books, education, training. Then one day, I think it was either June 18th or June 28th, every prison camp, and there were 7 or 8 of them, every prison camp cut the wires and escaped on that night, between 10 and 12 o'clock at night. I can only speculate, but I have a feeling that it was set up with the President of Korea and some of our generals and Mr. Truman, who was still the president at the time. They wanted more soldiers in the ROC armies. So in order to get them without conscription, because the population was either too young or too old. Now understand, in the 40s you became a papasan in Korea, you were old.
Yeah.
So there was a different, so you had to be from 18 to 25 or 30 in order to be what would be, you see, the prime of life at that time. Now this is in the 50s again. Mm-hmm. So they needed people in the ROC army, the South Korean army. So the object was, I think, to get all of these prisoners to escape so that they could be conscripted or volunteer to get into the South Korean army. And I think that's how it all happened. And I can't prove it, but I just know that that's pretty much what happened. So then, of course, the MPs, I told you, the MPs came in, it wasn't a Quonset hut, it was like a prefab house. They grabbed me up against the wall. They thought because we had a radio broadcasting station that we were broadcasting to the prisoners. Yeah. Break out, break out, yeah. Break out.
Well, you can understand, simultaneously, all this at the same, so there must have been some way they communicated to say, okay, this is the time of the day, and blah, blah, blah.
Because none of the MPs understood Korean, and we did, so it was difficult. They thought that we were working in cahoots with the prisoners. And of course they did, and unfortunately I saw a friend of mine shot right through the neck out the back door of my building. They were everywhere. It was like a riot. They were running everywhere, and the MPs just had a field day. They were shooting everybody and one friend of mine, not this artist, but one friend of mine who used to come to our camp, got shot right in the neck and went down, and that wasn't so nice to see. So,
was it not? All these people took off. What did you do with the camp then? Close it up?
They closed it up. I think right now, it's I don't know if it's an airport or something. I met somebody from Korea who was in my store over in Coleman, Florida, and they said that there was something there. There was it's some kind of a school or something that they're still using the grounds for something, and the buildings were built pretty well. So there were a lot of Quonset huts and prefab buildings there. So they're still using them. Little town was called Nunsan, and it was a tiny little town. But that's what this jewelry thing was.
Yeah, so you have that up there. Why don't you show us what that is?
Yeah, this is my name. It's inscribed in Korean, and it says Sin Tae Kyun, which Sin was. There was a friend of mine who had a tea room in Nunsan, dirt floors, no tile or anything, just dirt floors. They used to take a broom and keep it clean all the time. They had tea.
Forever sweeping, right?
They had tea. They had tea and she adopted me, and so her family name was Sin, so that became my name. And then Tae Kyun was worldly, world traveled, which means that I came from the United States and got to Korea, and it meant that I had traveled around the world to get there. So they engraved this for me and gave it to me when I left there. It says Sin Tae Kyun. So then this painting was taken.
Hold it up there so people can see.
This was taken from. I was 20 years old then when that was done, just before I went in the Army, and the back of it was our tent. This was the canvas that we used for our tent when I went to live there first, when I got snowed on at night with the holes in the roof. And we for the artists and the people who could do artwork, we cut up the canvas, put them in different blocks, and gave them to the artists. And then, because we gave them the canvas, this one fellow decided to paint. I gave him a picture of that picture, and he painted this. Now it's primitive. It's kind of, you know.
It's unique, actually.
It's
on canvas, there's quite a bit of history there.
The colors are very oriental. They're not Western colors, but it's what they had, and it's what we gave them. We gave them the paints. We gave them pencils. We gave them rubber shoe soles. And the national industry in Korea was rubber shoes. So why we gave them shoe soles? We had hundreds and thousands of crates of shoe soles, and they didn't wear them. They didn't wear Western shoes. So I don't know why we gave it to them.
Yeah.
But we gave them paint, we gave them pencils, we gave them pens, we gave them brushes, because they used brush to do calligraphy. And they really did appreciate it. They appreciated the work that we were doing for them. Now, how long it went, I don't know. As I said, the ultimate goal was to instill in them that a democracy is better than what they had, which is better than what they have in North Korea, which was the same thing almost, down in South Korea. So. Interesting. It was an interesting country. Of course, there were no trees. There were just hills, and rice paddies, and that's it. They had an ingenious way of heating their homes. They had tunnels that went all around, very intricate. It was like a maze of tunnels in rocks, and they would set a fire under the floor, and they knew where the wind was going to be blowing, so they had all of these tunnels underneath of the floor, and the floor was paper. There were 15, 16, 18, 20, 30 layers of newspapers that were shellacked onto the floor. That was their floor, over whatever wood, over the structure that they had. And the heat would go through and radiate up through the paper floors. So that's how they stayed. Warm.
And the stones would absorb the heat.
The stones, yeah, they were hot rocks, is what they were. And that's how they kept the heat. There were no furnaces or anything like that they had at that time.
Yeah.
I mean, don't forget, we were still using typewriters when we were doing reports and things. That was pre-computer days.
Yeah.
So
young people out there have no idea what a typewriter is.
well, you know what they're doing
and
now?
a ribbon. You put a ribbon on it. Oh wow.
Yeah, they're taking the buttons, the keys, and making jewelry out of them now. I think.
Yeah, probably.
What they're doing with them now, pins and jewelry and stuff. So, but it was a very interesting career, and as I said, we used to go. They wanted to learn English, and I wanted to learn Korean. So. That's how we got into this stuff, this Tangsihini Chusin Samul Kasumeyan Koso. We used to sing these things at the tea room when we would go, and the teachers would go with us, and we'd visit, And
it's a good way to learn the language. But
yeah, it was. We learned, yeah. Of course, they were, as I said, my friend, she was always playing Carmen because she had the records. They had an old 78 record player there, and that's the only
another
music.
thing young people.
That's the only music that they had. Were 78 records,
Yeah, one side.
Yeah, and by the way, my grandfather was one of the Swiss toolmaker who started the RCA Victor Talking Machine Company in Camden, New Jersey. By the way.
Oh yeah.
But that was the record business. But it was enjoyable, and then they still spoke Japanese, because the Japanese had been in control of Korea for so many years. So they spoke Japanese, Korean, and somewhat Chinese. So when we would go in a pickup truck into town to go to the tea rooms and visit and go shopping or whatever, like 4 or 5 stores, we'd go shopping. But
there was no mall, huh?
Yeah. But coming home, we would sing. There's one song that we used to sing. It was called the Coal Miner Song. It was Japanese. It wasn't Korean. But Rip, my friend Rip, who was in show business with me, he used to do it down in Miami Beach. There's a predominance of Jewish people there. So there was this one, it was a coal miner song that the Koreans all sang. And it was, Machino chisa na kihisatene, haita toke no futari wa uchato kasiyo mayin na shite, hito kotomo shabe lado. And it was a coal miner.
That was my favorite song at one time.
We all loved it.
Yeah.
But it was a coal miner song, and it was Machino. It was a yo-yo.
What do the words mean? Do you know?
Well, it was
in English.
We're working in the mines, and we're digging the coal, and it was it was the Seven Dwarfs in Korean is what it was. It was like the Seven Dwarfs.
Like hi ho, hi ho.
Yeah, hi ho, hi ho, hi ho. But it was yo yo was the main thing. Yo-yo would come out, and yo-yo in Japanese would be hi-ho, I guess.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
That's what it is, yeah.
We solved that mystery.
So you're right, yeah, we got that settled now. But it was a fascinating experience. I mean, some people didn't like it, but when you're there, and my feeling was when you're there, and you have to be there, and there's no place else you can go, you might as well enjoy it and try to learn what you can from it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you there. I mean, it's an opportunity to see a different part of the world a lot of people will never see, and
right, exactly.
You know, there's the good and the bad and everything. So
it's all changed now. It's all completely changed now.
Yeah, we had a gentleman on this show who several of the Korean veterans from Chapter 169 here in Leesburg.
Yeah.
Had gone back to Korea, and with the Korean government. And because the Korean government paid their transportation, and they paid like half of their spouses, I think. Don't quote me.
Yeah.
But he spoke, about how things have changed. What used to be just little hills, and now there's great big buildings in South Korea and everything.
There's one.
Have you ever gone back? Have you ever been to Korea again?
No, I wish I could. I don't know if I'd want to go back now. I would like to have gone back earlier. I'd like to go back to Japan, too. Most of the places I knew in Japan are gone. An image that sticks in my head, it's a PTSD, I guess, I don't know, but traveling on the trains was like Teddy Roosevelt's trains. They were really like left over from 1915, 1913. I can remember, this was at the height of the war, there were these little kids, maybe they grew up early, 2, 5, 6, 7 or so. They had men's army uniforms that they had stolen and stuff, and they had rusted beer cans with the lids back up at the train, collecting steam drippings from the engine to drink to keep their stomachs warm.
Wow.
And I'll never forget it.
No.
I close my eyes and I can see those little kids just trying to, and they would hold the can in their hands because it would keep their hands warm because the steam was coming out of the steam engines. And I'll never forget it. It was, in fact, I took some pictures of it. I have some slides. Anybody know what slides are?
Yeah,
the old pictures that you used to take.
We're dating ourselves here.
I know.
But I think a lot of GIs, actually I say GIs, the men and women, of course, have seen experiences similar to that. I remember one issue when I was overseas. We had torn down this old shed, and this fellow airman said he needed help to unload the truck. So they said, well, take this guy. And that, I was just a kid. I was like 18, 19 years old. Well, yeah, I could get in the truck, and we're going into the dump. And he says, I says, where are we going to dump this? How are we going to dump this? He says, what? We're not going to dump this. He says, just roll your window up and lock your door. And we went through it like about 1 mile an hour. And all these kids came out of nowhere. And they climbed up on the truck and started throwing everything off. Yeah. And I remember seeing one kid who had a badly deformed face up against the window looking in at me, and I'm going, wow, and then they're throwing all this stuff out. The kid threw off a 2x4, about a 5-foot length 2x4.
Yeah.
jumped down to get it, and there was this old woman there, picked up the board like she was going to hit him with it.
Yeah.
Leave me alone, it's mine now.
Yeah.
And you say, well, how lucky we are to live in this country.
Yeah, I know.
You know, and the men and the women that sacrificed for us so we could have all this, you know.
Yeah.
And you're talking that little, you know, that incident there where a kid is trying to just get some water.
You mentioned the
the
woman that picked up the thing. You know, the Koreans used to pay their taxes by breaking up rocks.
Wow, I didn't know that.
They used to sit on the little mama-sans and the little babies would sit and they would take rocks with hammers and crack them. And that's how the roads, that was road maintenance. This is how they paid their taxes.
Oh,
they had
wow.
so much of a space to do in front of their property, and they would crack up the rocks and spread them all around. And this was their tax obligation that they had to keep the roads.
You know,
up.
Stu, I got to tell you something. I wish this show was an hour long, but it's only a half hour long.
Yeah, I know.
And we only got about 2 minutes left that we, you know, to chat. Is there any one particular thing that you'd like to talk about? And I'd also like to know, when you got out, where'd you go after that?
Well, I met Rip down in Fort Lauderdale. we went to work we were doing a pantomime act in a strip joint in Fort Lauderdale. And then I started, it was easy. I had liked to dance a lot, so I became a dancer and had a dance studio down in the Casablanca Hotel in Miami Beach. And Rip went up to stand-up comedy. So that's where we went after that. I went back into show business.
Is he as wild as he looks?
Yeah, but he was very quiet when he wasn't performing.
Yeah.
Comics are very strange people.
Mm.
They're on all the time, or they're off all the time. There's not much in between. But you know, we used to send up postcards, and I worked at the Casablanca Hotel, so we would give them to the guests at the hotel. They would take them back home, and they would mail them back to Rip's agent to tell them how great it was to see the show and all this stuff. So,
well, like I said, you know, we're out of time.
okay, doke.
So once again, I want to thank you for coming on the show.
Oh,
my
you're
friend.
quite welcome. It's been
And like I
enjoyable.
said, I wish we had more time because I'm sure you could tell us more. And I think that's great what you did over there, trying to instill an education in those people and let them know about a better life that's out there. So
It was,
my
I
hat's
hope-
off to you there, sir.
It was
And
very rewarding, I hope.
I think so. I think you made a difference. But anyway, it's time to go. So this is how I do it, Stu. To all our veterans out there, active military and their families, we salute you for all you do. Till next time. This is our 4th year at Lakefront TV. We're still looking for guests, and we'd love to have you on. We're proud of what we've done in the past. So give us a call at 352-728-9707 and check us out on the internet at lakefronttv.com. Spread the word and enjoy the show.